Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of React Native Radio. I'm your panelist for today, Josh Justice. It's just me this time. And we have our special guest today is Zain Sajjad. Say hello.
Hello.
Cool. So Zain was on React Roundup podcast just a few weeks ago, and but got into some React Native stuff over there. So we wanted to have him on React Native Radio as well to dig in. So before we get into that, Zain, why don't you just tell folks a bit about yourself, your background, why you're famous, and all that good stuff.
I'm leading the team of front-end developers here at Peekaboo Guru. And I started my career as a computer science graduate from GFK Utilize, a product data company. And since I started my software development career, I have been working on front-end development all the time. Not much into the back-end side, but so I started career with native JavaScript and then moved to Angular at GFK. And for past 4 years, we are working with React at Peekaboo. And we are a very React-centric company. We use React on our web interfaces and React Native on our mobile interfaces.
Infinite Red is a US-based consultancy specializing in React and React Native. They do mobile app and web design and development. They are deeply involved in the React and React Native open source communities, publish the React Native newsletter with 10,000 subscribers, and are involved with the React Native core development. If you have a project and need design or engineering help from an experienced team to take it all the way from concept to completion, get in touch with Infinite Red. Also check out Chain React, the React Native conference, which is hosted by Infinite Red in July in Portland with 500 developers from all around the world. You can find them at infinite.red. Make sure to mention you heard about them in this ad.
What was the process like for you switching over from a web front-end background to get into React Native? Was it pretty natural to switch over onto that platform, or were there a lot of challenges?
It wasn't that difficult, but it was quite smooth, in fact, I would say, because the thing that if you have a good, strong knowledge of how React works, it's easier to go towards React Native. So when we started working with React on web interfaces, it was just that React was very new to front-end world, and libraries and different best practices were evolving. Were started to evolve around React. We were learning React along the way, and when we started developing our app interfaces, we selected React because we felt that it is something that allowed us to write good front ends, better front ends, and more composable UI. And also we focused on something. We also wanted to have a lot of code reusability across platforms. So we used a lot of our code from our web interfaces in our mobile interfaces, especially the JavaScript, native JavaScript part that that belongs to register store and actions and API fetch and all that kind of stuff, and all that complex business logic. We actually used that code into our mobile interfaces as well.
Yeah, beyond just the code sharing, I'm working on a project right now where we're sharing code across a React and React Native application. But beyond that, I'm realizing more, even just the mental model of React programming and just the edge cases, just the details of the framework. Oh, this lifecycle method is deprecated. We need to update to this, and just kind of being familiar with exactly how that works. It could be that developers are excited to pick up different libraries and frameworks and platforms. And those of us who have some experience can do that. But those edge cases will come up in a different library and a different framework, and so being able to have that be unified as well, I think that's just a deeper advantage of sharing React across mobile and web. I'm definitely appreciating that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is one of the best advantages I feel, that all of your development team is available when you are working on web, and they are very much trained. You are very much accustomed to what you are doing every day on the web, and you can implement that same mental model. You can use that mental model on mobile application development as well. So it's just a fantastic thing, and keeping in mind how much Facebook has been investing in performance side of React Native. This is the best choice for going for when you are not going for the native mobile apps. So if you are going for some mobile app for cross-platform mobile apps, I think React Native is one of the best choices.
Speaking of performance, that reminds me of the Hermes engine that Facebook recently released for Android. Are y'all writing on iOS and Android?
Yes, we are writing for both iOS and Android, and we just recently upgraded our app from React Native 59 to 61. And we have found that our time to interaction has been really good after this upgrade. And Hermes has some really cool advantages before Hermes, I remember there was a project by Facebook. It was pre-pack, I think. The most of the things that were planned in pre-pack are now available in Hermes. I mean, they wanted, compilation and pre-checking and all that stuff that was available in pre-pack is now coming to Hermes, and that I think is the best advantage of Hermes. It allows you to have a better TTI and a little bit increase in the size of the app, but again, that's bearable because all of your JavaScript is now more performant and your executions are better.
Are you using any tooling to measure time to interactive, or just like kind of manually looking at it and watching it as you test things out?
We actually use Firebase performance, and we analyze it. We actually use it for analyzing our loading time and time of first interaction, all that kind of stuff. So then there was an impact and there was a reflection on our performance indicators and our performance dashboards about how good this upgrade is.
This is exciting to get into the topic of performance. I just love to learn from folks that are really digging into this. I feel like in some applications, like different parts of the performance are more important than others. Maybe for some applications, starting up quickly is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. For others, you might keep it running for a long time, and so it's the speed while you're running in it. So for your particular application, have you found any specific parts of the performance to focus on, or are you just kind of trying to improve things across the board?
It was more of the later one, that we wanted to improve things across the board rather than targeting a single area. We are coming up with a big release. We are adding up a lot of new features. So this was something, most of those features rely on mobile machine learning and that kind of stuff. So we just wanted things to, go very smoothly. And the startup time was one key factor, and other key factors also, you have to keep things rolling and when a user is using, actually during the usage. So both factors were important to us, and we tried to focus on both, and Hermes was a good addition.
Now, you mentioned that navigation in React Native is something you've been focusing on lately. What have you been working in and thinking about when it comes to navigation?
We have tried both of the top navigation solutions available. We have used React Native navigation by Wix for our B2C app, and we have used React navigation for our B2B solutions. So having experience of both, I feel that React navigation is something that has been doing great in the past few years. As a library, they're doing great. They're growing at a very good pace. And the ecosystem that's building around it, React navigation is now using React Native screens. It has been using React Native gesture handler and React Native reanimated, and all that kind of stuff that, all these things when brought together give you a lot of good performance. So having said that, we are using React Native navigation in our app, but that decision was made around 3 years ago. And now I think, in fact, 2 years ago, sorry. So now I feel that if I get a chance, I'll obviously select React navigation, because the API that React navigation has is much better than what React Native navigation has. And, I feel that after the introduction of the React Native screens, React Native gesture handler, and reanimated, from performance perspective, React navigation has gone way ahead than as compared to where it was 2 years back. And it's moving at a good pace. So I think it will get better and better in the future.
Have you gotten a chance to play with the React Navigation 5? I think there's maybe an alpha or a beta out with a new API. Have you played with that at all?
No, I haven't got the chance to play with React Navigation 5, but yeah, we are using V4 and we are very happy with it as of now.
Yeah, us too. Yeah. The React Native navigation reminds me, are your apps, is there much integration with like custom native code or like a brownfield application, or are these pretty much stock standard React Native applications where most of it lives in the JavaScript?
It's more of React native application. I mean, we are not having a lot of native UI part, but when we started, React navigation wasn't has come a long way that it has right now. So it was very early stage for React navigation, and at that point, it was quite interesting that we started with React navigation in our app, and after 2 months of development, we realized that no, this is not going to work out because we had a lot of complex listings, a lot of complex, we had camera view and list views and map views, and when stack goes beyond 20, 25 screens, things started to slow down on React navigation. And that's where we realized that we had to, get our navigation part out. You just cannot keep everything in single fragment in a large app. So we just moved towards React native navigation, and that brought a lot of good performance to our app. And at that point of time, React native navigation was better for larger apps because it divides your app into number of fragments, especially on Android. And we live in the region where Android is more popular as compared to iOS. And in fact, on Android, there are a lot of low-end devices. So you have to be thinking of them more as compared to iOS users and the users with good performance on good performance phones. So React native navigation proved better. And but now I think again React navigation has come a long way, and they have done really great work. I would obviously select React navigation over native navigation if I restart Peekaboo.
As you're doing your development, how do you keep an eye on these lower end Android phones to make sure the app performs well? Are you doing your development day to day on a lower end physical device, or is that a part of a QA cycle or something?
It's both. I mean, we usually don't use a very high end phones for our development purposes. So the reason behind that is that it allows you to have a feeling that how it's going to work on actually the low end devices. And we also have a large number of devices available for a quality assurance department, and they also check for different devices and all that kind of stuff. So it goes mix and match both ways.
I could see the benefit of that. Like I could say that I'm going to prioritize performance, but if I can't avoid it being slow because my phone is on a lower end phone, like that's when I know I'll be accountable. That's when I know I'll really care about performance because it's personal to me.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So you also wrote a blog post recently about React best practices. That came up on React Roundup as well. Why don't you talk about this post a bit and like the motivation behind it and why this topic matters to you?
The best practices thing raised to me as a topic when I was training few of our new resources, and they were coming from a background. They had an year of experience with React and working with different sort of projects. And we here working, keeping in mind that we were working on a product, and you have to think a little bit in a long-term perspective. From long-term perspective, when you are working for a product rather than a project. And so, you have to train people coming in with how you think, what mental models you guys follow here. And that actually allowed me to, catch up on everything that we learned during the process. And I thought that actually training material and all that stuff can be merged together to bring up a code, blog post, and it went well.
That's cool. I definitely, when I'm, bringing new people onto the team, or as a consultant, when I'm joining a new organization, it's a cool chance. You interact with new people, you find out, you learn something new from them. You find out what you know that you do was just subconscious, but now I have to say it now. I have to put words around it, and it kind of consolidates that knowledge. And then you decided to share this publicly as well, not just within your company. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it actually helps us as well because, every time you share something with the community, that's going to come back to you and that's going to help you.
One of my favorite communities in programming these days is the Angular community. Every time I go to an Angular conference or meet up with some of my friends who are in the Angular community, I have a great time. And a lot of them have wound up on Adventures in Angular. So if you're doing front-end development, you're looking for a way to keep current on the Angular ecosystem, and you want to have a good time listening to fun people talk about great topics related to Angular, then go check out Adventures in Angular at adventuresinangular.com.
Before we dig into the details of the blog post, question for you. I'm sort of a cross-platform person. I've worked on different front-end frameworks, back-end frameworks, and some of them have more of a focus on conventions and standards than the React world. Whereas in the React world, there's lots of different libraries, and any project you're on, you pick the combination of libraries that work for you. So I'm curious if you think that coming to best practices is harder in the React world because of that variance, or if there's maybe some benefits to all the variety of different approaches.
So I personally feel that this, what I would call it as a lack of best practices, or you can term it the other way, a fight or a bit of debate between what's the best. This allows a React community to grow, not just community, and not just as a community, but also this allows the developers coming into the community to think a little more. You have to go an extra mile to solve a problem the better way. If you have a set of best practices available already, then you at times might move a little bit into the process where you stop thinking a lot. But if that's the part of the growth, and that's something that you actually analyze at times that there is a stable company and then there is a startup. So at startup, what you learn is very different from a stable company. So from a library that's still growing and growing and growing, the things you learn is pretty different from the languages that are already set it up. So that's actually a good thing, and that allows developers to think a bit differently. But on the contrary, it may hit you really hard. So you might have to, you might reach a point where your decisions hurt you a lot, especially the decisions that were not taken with very long-term thought process. There are certain best practices available, and I think that if you follow those, then there can be a lot other things that can there are a lot of things that you can avoid. I mean, there are things that you can follow to avoid such pitfalls.
What you said made me think, this is some good suggestions for new developers or developers that are new to React. Maybe on the one side, like, don't be discouraged. Try not to be discouraged by the lack of structure, but just know that you kind of have a responsibility yourself of to explore and to learn from folks that have found good patterns to apply. And then also just kind of relish the opportunities to think outside the box. Find some standards that work with you, and then try to experiment to see if something seems painful, or you just, you've heard about a new thing. But also, don't come to the point where you're at an extreme of always pulling down the latest library or second guessing yourself. I think that would probably be the worst thing, is if individuals or teams felt discouraged about the breadth of tooling that's out there, when it's hey, both of these navigation libraries are probably really great. Any of the really popular state management libraries, any of them would probably be pretty great. Probably you're not going to hurt yourself by choosing one. So make a choice, move forward with confidence, and just reassess when the time is right.
Yeah, that's the point.
So let's get into your best practices post then. What about it would you like to talk about? Do you want to give us an overview of the different points in it, or maybe there's one or two you'd like to dive in more detail?
Okay, so let's start. Let me just give an overview. We discussed actually 9 different parts, and we can go through them one by one.
Great.
So starting from container presentational components, this is, I think, one of the key factors of keeping your React application simpler and more scalable from developers' perspective, right? So container presentation part is something that comes from, cognitive tendencies. You divide your code in small pieces to make sure that you focus on a single part at the given time. If you have your code too much amalgamated into itself, too much spaghetti, then it's really tough to focus on the problems that you are solving. So what container and presentational component pattern describes, it's something that Dan Abramov wrote about long ago. And it says that you bring out all of your stateful logics or all of your business logics outside of your presentational components. So earlier it was more about higher order components, and now it's more towards hooks. And the idea behind is that you have to keep your stateful or business logic out of your presentational components. So let's consider an example of you are writing a small page of screen that has a list of blogs on it. So there are two parts of doing this. One part is, fetching your blogs from server, and the other part and keeping them in the store and fetching more blogs when it is required, and having API and parameters and all that stuff. And the other part is rendering your list of blogs. For the first part, fetching your blogs and all that kind of stuff, you can create a container and extract that all sort of stateful logic or your Redux store and APIs and everything outside. And then you have a presentational component. That presentational component is set just to render things. It does not have to have any state, or it does not make any API calls. So if you are displaying a list of blogs on two different places with two different UI, you can have a two different presentational component, but your container part remains same, and same containers supply data to your presentational part. So that's what container presentation components architecture is. And I think this also has a benefit when you are using your code base across React and React Native. So
another benefit I've seen is I've used a Storybook.js a little bit for kind of displaying my presentational components. And by doing that, I actually found places where they were depending on some logic, and there's some logic included there. And so that made Storybook a bit messy. Like, it was actually doing something when I clicked on something. So Storybook was really helpful in that regard to push me, to give me like a design pressure towards keeping the presentational components separate. And it just kind of showed me the difference between those concerns. It made it more natural to separate them. Cool.
And I think that also allows you to organize your UI better.
You want to move on to the next best practice?
So the next part that I would like to discuss before starting, I would suggest you to watch the video by Monica Land, a talk by Monica Land, where she described the architectures and large-scale applications. She used a phrase that touched me a lot, that architecture as enabling constraints. So it's more about that, rather than building a lot of stiff architectures, you actually build constraints. You restrict how we supply our data through our app, restrict how much abstraction is allowed in your app, restrict developers from merging business logic into presentational components, as we discussed earlier. So when you are working on large-scale applications, and when you are laying down a foundation of large-scale applications, it's more about enabling good constraints. So if you have a good set of constraints in place, there are very less chance that your app will turn out, your code base will turn out into a mess when it goes into beast. So you have to have a very good set of constraints available. You just keep your things together. You just have to make certain rules to ensure that your files are together, your logics are separated, and all that kind of stuff. That will allow you to have a better architecture and a scalable front-end code.
You know what this makes me think? I tend to, when it comes to folder structure or anything like that, I tend to find or pick a convention and stick with it. But what you're describing here, it makes me think of the whole principle of like keeping an eye on what changes frequently and what changes infrequently, or what changes together and what doesn't. And so you may find that your first thought about what would change frequently together is not what actually happens. And so if that happens, that could be a chance to change things around. So this makes me want to keep an eye out more on if I am changing files all throughout my code base. And give me a reason to consider a different folder structure rather than just picking something random. So thanks for that.
Yeah. So you learn actually when you move. It's not easy to predict right at the start. So as long as you move, you start getting new ideas and you start getting better at things. So it's just that we learn from the experiences.
Yeah.
So the other next part that hurt us in our development processes at time is When you are working with open source stuff, or when you are working with open source stuff, you have a lot of dependencies on third-party code, the code that has been written and maintained by other developers. And you rely on that part, and at times you have to switch from things. For example, let's discuss it with example. For example, you have chosen a library to display a slider in your app, right? You are not just developing it from the scratch. You just use a third-party library to show an image slider, right? When you use any third-party library and that image slider is being displayed on, let's say it's being displayed on 6 screens of your app in 6 different ways, right? What happens when you move forward with this is at times you come up with you are given a requirement that's not satisfied with that particular slider, or you find out that that's the approach that slider took was not very good, and you can have a more optimized and a better library, or let's say you want to do it yourself now. When you merge and embed any such third-party libraries inside of your app too much, changing such libraries becomes a hassle. Now you have to go through different files of your app and change everywhere, and you have to test it again and again if that all of these components that you changed are working correctly. But the approach we took here is that we usually try to wrap such libraries inside our own wrapper and our own wrapper API. So our developers are not using third-party libraries directly, but they are using it via our wrappers, and those wrappers unify things. So you just have to change the library behind that wrapper, and you don't have to change a lot of things going inside your app. But again, just don't go into too much of abstraction. You don't have to have wrapper around every third-party library. You just have to be a little smart to think that what used a lot and what's not, what requires a wrapper and what doesn't.
This is great to hear, because I've heard of this practice on other platforms, but I haven't noticed it as much in the React world. And so hearing that principle I've heard of before can apply here as well makes me excited to try it. The other thing that I've seen in this is not just that it saves you effort, like, oh, my refactoring and switching to a new dependency will be easier versus harder, but I've also seen it so that you can decide not to switch for a longer period of time. It's like you have a dependency that's not really serving you well, but the cost of switching is so high that you just deal with it, and it just drains your productivity over time. So just lowering the threshold to be able to make a switch that you wouldn't otherwise be able to make can be a really powerful thing.
Yeah, that's the thing, that this helps you, especially when you have a lot of dependency on third parties and you are doing a big refactor and all that stuff. You are more worried about performance and things. You are optimizing things. This becomes really helpful for you.
Cool. What's next?
So the other part is there's a famous quote. It says, "Any fool can write a code that a computer can understand. A good programmer writes the code that humans can understand." That's from Martin Flower. So we actually see when you are analyzing a problem or you are understanding someone else's code, every time you open up a new file or you open up a new component, if you have a different structure of how components are written or how code is written, you have to navigate too much around and see how things are happening and all that kind of stuff. So we actually used Fluke.js, and what we did was that every time we created a new component in our React or React Native applications, we have a certain set of constraints. Every component will have index file. Every component will have its own messages file. We use React INTL, and that's a great library, and that all the messages of your component are coupled with are placed into a separate file. That's messages file, and then there is your style file. So you have 3 files with every presentational component. When you start any new container, you have different files. You have actions, you have reducers, you have sagas or thunk, and then you have index file that combines everything. And you also have a repository for test, where you have all the test cases written for all of these 4 modules. So whenever we started building a new component or container, you have to create all these files. But all of these files in different across containers look quite similar to each other. What we did was we wrote a generator using Fluke.js, and whenever anybody wants to add a container, there is a command to add a container that will take inputs and make files for you that are quite identical to what other files look like in your repository, in your app. This allows you to have it easier to read components, and this allows developers to have a synchronous style of coding things.
Yeah, that consistency definitely makes sense. The mental load of having to look at differences that are not there for a reason, or having to put multiple files in place that doesn't feel like you need it at first, but it'll get painful over time. Yeah, things like that you could automate just helps your team so much. By the way, that reminds me, I didn't ask you, how many developers do you have? I think that'll give us a good mental model for like the context that these best practices came out of.
We actually have a team of around 15 developers here, and we are working on who are working on front-end part.
Gotcha. That's definitely big enough that not everybody is going to hear right away when somebody makes a decision or tries a new thing. So yeah, I could see these, consistency tools can be valuable at any team size, but 15 is definitely the size where it seems like the payoff could start to increase a lot.
Yeah, in fact, it's something that allows you to also save your time. If you have good generators in place, you can just, start developing components faster. You just have to write a command and it generates all the files for you, and you are just right onto the coding part. So this also helps if you are coding it alone, just about getting better pace.
For sure.
Yeah. So the next part is the very famous ESLint and Prettiers. We don't have a very good IDEs for JavaScript. I mean, if you are not using TypeScript, it's having been loosely typed language, it's tough to have a very much of better composed IDE. I think ESLint and Prettier are helping it a lot. And you just cannot, don't have to, refresh your app every time before seeing these errors. And having the plugins available in VS Code, this saves a lot of time. So before you write test, you must have these all pre-test things available. That's linting and Prettier part enabled in your code to make it, better before test.
Gotcha.
One of the things that I have as a goal for devchat.tv is to cover technologies that are up and coming, things that we're probably going to have to deal with on a more regular basis in the future. Some of these include AI, VR, and one of them is blockchain. So I reached out to one of the experts that I knew, Gregory McCubbin, and we pulled together a few other people, and we've started a podcast called Adventures in Blockchain. So if you're looking at blockchain as something that you may want to work in, something that you're curious about learning more about, or something that you just want to keep current on until you have the opportunity to make a career jump and go over and work in blockchain and crypto, then definitely check out Adventures in Blockchain. You can find it at adventuresinblockchain.io.
So next part is portability of code, keeping it usable for other platforms. One of the most attractive taglines that React had was learn once, write everywhere. So this was also one of the major reasons we selected React over other frameworks at Peekaboo Guru. So from portability of code for different platforms, we mean that just don't make the platform-specific code embedded inside your logics or your view. Let's take an example. You need a permission for geolocation, or you need to include a permissions module in your application. You have a container that holds all the current location or the device location of your user, and that container wants to trigger location and then trigger geolocation. It wants to trigger permission and then trigger geolocation events. One way is to have this geolocation and permission part embedded inside your container. But this will keep your container constrained to be used on a web platform if you are developing it first for web, or if you are using any of React Native library for performance, for permission or geolocation within your container. This will So this will restrict your containers to be used on the platform they are developed for. For example, you imported React Native permissions into your container, or you imported React Native geolocation into your container. Now your container is dependent upon React Native or React Native package that you are using. Instead of doing this, what we prefer is that extracting all of these platform-oriented stuff outside of your container or your presentational components. So you will have a totally different directory, or I would say totally different module that handles everything that's related to platform, be it permissions, be it geolocation, or be it anything else that's hardcore platform-oriented, be it navigation. So you have that navigation, permission, geolocation, all that platform-related stuff grouped together outside of your containers and presentational components. This will allow you to port your containers or presentational components across different platforms. I mean, you can use them on React Native, you can use them on React Unity, you can use them with 360, you can use them with React Native or any other vendor of React.
There's really a lot of overlap between this principle and the idea of isolating those third-party dependencies, whether it's from a library that you choose or whether it's from just a platform dependency. And I think the fact that Jest doesn't, you have some points about tests we're going to get to in just a moment. The fact that Jest doesn't run in a React Native environment, I think is actually really beneficial in this regard, because it's better to have a separation of concerns, to have your container components separate from these native interfaces and things like that. And so this is a general encouragement I give folks in testing is when you find that there's some platform dependency or other kind of requirement that a test needs and your test is erroring out, instead of finding a way to pull that in or mocking it, think about if you can separate it out, just like you're suggesting here. So you can get the class or the function, the component under test to be more focused, and you can put the dependency somewhere else. This also reminds me of an article that I'll post in the show notes by a well-known tester named J.B. Rainsberger. He talks about this idea of the demilitarized zone, of setting up your code where you have the code that's kind of your business logic and the core of your application. And then you have this layer of connecting over to third-party services. And he has sort of this funny metaphor of like, oh, it's the outside world. I don't trust it. It's scary. He kind of talks about it that way. But partially here, like this results in this code that just kind of does a handoff to the platform dependency or third parties. And sometimes you can make that code small enough and thin enough that you don't even need to test it. Like, oh, it's just kind of passing through, but it's isolating me from having to connect to that third-party code. So yeah, I see so many benefits from this topic that you're talking about here.
Yeah, that's. I mean, there are a lot of good things coming out of it, no doubt about it. So moving on to the next one, writing test. Kent C. Dodd once wrote that write test. Not too many, but integration. So he also has React testing library, and that's one of the best testing libraries I have encountered ever. And I personally feel that if you are into development, in fact, if you are starting with this, even with a smaller team, you have a very less time to develop stuff. But make sure that you get the chance and you focus on writing tests. This will really help you in keeping your team's pace in future. If you are implementing number of features, you are doing a refactor, these test cases and these tests will help you a lot to make sure that you are keeping things smooth and you are not breaking up things while moving fast. So there is Enzyme available, Jest available, you have the testing library available, and there's one really great library, that's Cypress, for your end-to-end testing of your application, and it has really a great developer experience.
Yeah, there are a few parallels that are React Native specific as well. There's a React Native testing library that we had one of the maintainers of that on the show recently. I use that one a lot. I believe the React testing library has become a whole ecosystem, and so I think there's a native testing library built on that foundation as well that also lets you work with React Native components. And then Detox is a great option for end-to-end testing in React Native. So I just like when I reach for React testing library in Cypress on the web, I'll reach for React Native testing library in Detox on native.
Yeah, that's the same thing we are using here with Peekaboo Guru. So we have Cypress on our web and Detox on our mobile interfaces.
Nice, good confirmation that I'm on the right track. That's great.
Yeah. So discussing about continuous integration, CI and CD. This is a good part. There are a number of tools available to do this. And there's Circle CI, Travis, and other. Circle CI also has a good tutorials for React Native as well. So you can just, keeping these tools right at the start of your application will allow you to have, this won't lower down your pace of delivery just because you are not sure that things aren't breaking, and you don't have to wait for other people to you don't have to wait for builds to go out to your QA and other stakeholders. This just feels good. It takes a little bit of time to set up these tools earlier, but that's worth it.
I've been getting CI and CD work. I'm having some trouble getting CI and CD working on React Native lately. What specific tools do you use? Like what stack of platforms and stuff do you use for CI testing React Native?
So we have just started implementing Circle CI here, and the team that's implementing CI, Circle CI is really happy so far, and they are going to come up with some good results, I hope, in the coming days. So I'd be happy to share that journey.
Have you gotten to get a detox test running on CI yet?
I don't have much idea about it, but yeah, I think since it's a part of our QA cycle, so they must have been doing this as well.
Cool. Yeah, that's just the stage of the process that I'm in, trying to figure that all out. So yeah. Cool to see. Maybe we'll get you back sometime once you've got that in place. You can give us all the details.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Is that all the points in the best practices article?
Yep, that's all from our side.
Cool. That's really exciting. Thank you so much for coming on to share this. Like I've said all along, like this is resonating with a number of kind of deeper principles that I've seen elsewhere. So this is getting me excited. Like I want to dig into some of these more, give them a try. Maybe we can stay in touch and converse about questions and things that I've run across and putting these principles into practice.
Sure, for sure. You can reach me anytime.
Yeah, I think we're just about running out of time for our recording here. So where can people stay in touch with you if they want to hear about other blog posts you do in the future or what you've been up to?
I'm available on Twitter, and you can ping me there. You can DMs are always open, and you can also read all of my blogs on Twitter handle. I usually post them as soon as the blogs go public.
Great. What is your Twitter handle?
It's Zain Sajjad 93.
Oh, cool. You just put it in the show notes. Perfect.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's wrap up today with some picks. I have a few of those to share. So first, mine is kind of a general one. I want to pick meetup organizers this week. So in the last 3 or 4 years, I've just been to a bunch of meetups and really benefited from them. Getting the opportunity to get public speaking practice by sharing at meetups and sharing what I know. Not to mention the fact that I got my job at Big Nerd Ranch at a meetup as someone shared a job opportunity there. So I think meetups are really great. I'd really encourage folks to attend them. The idea of networking in general was never very appealing to me. Like, I gotta focus on making connections to advance my career. But going to meetups to hear about topics that are cool and interesting was something that was very motivating for me. And there's so much effort that goes into running a meetup. I just want to thank meetup organizers in the big cities where there's so many people coming and so much to do. In the small towns where it can be harder to find people to share topics. Just thank you to all programming meetup organizers, because that community that you create really helps folks out. And as I'm someone who really cares about work environment and that folks getting good places to work, it's just so great for people to meet people outside of their company, to hear if maybe things are better somewhere else, or maybe there are principles that they can bring back to make where they work now better. So thank you to meetup organizers. I really appreciate it. My second pick is food. I like food. And so this one is a place called Poke Bar. It's a chain for poke. I'm not sure if I'm even pronouncing the dish name correctly. And I'm sure our listeners that are more in touch with the latest trends would be, this is probably over and done with and they've moved on. But for me, this is new. And in Atlanta, Georgia, poke is new. I guess it's a Hawaiian bowl with raw fish and other kinds of ingredients. I'm somebody who loves sushi a lot, and so poke is very familiar to me. I really enjoy it. And a Poke Bar brand in particular, it seems like there's about a dozen states or so across the U.S. That they're expanding into. So Zain, is poke something that you eat where you are at? Is that something that's familiar to you?
No, that's totally alien to me.
Gotcha. Well, if it ever comes your way, then you will have heard about it now. So
Okay.
I recommend it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Zain, thank you so much again for being on the show. I really appreciate it. It's been great to talk to you. Great to have these ideas to dig into a little bit further. And hopefully we'll be in touch on Twitter.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening. And we'll be back again next week with another episode of React Native Radio. Thank you.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.